Hey everybody, welcome to the episode of Thought Leaders. I'm your host Chris Shang, and today we have David Edelman, who is a former Fortune 50 CMO. He also has a great track record being at different management consulting firms, being an advisor to various tech startups, as well as seasoned executives. Thank you so much for joining us, David.
Delighted to be here, Chris.
Awesome. Before we kind of dive into, I think, a lot of the different topics that you would be an expert in, especially with the transformation and the whole space, I think, of like marketing and as it pertains to your experience as well. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved. I saw, you started off in management consulting. You did that for over 10 years. How did that then lead into the world of marketing or as an executive in marketing for you?
Yeah, sure. Actually, it started way back in 1989, before the internet. I was a young consultant at the Boston Consulting Group, and I had done 3 projects in a row where the client was trying to figure out how to use newly available customer information
Mm,
for supermarket loyalty programs, for targeting magazine advertising, for managing attrition, all different topics. And I thought there was something there to this trend. And I asked BCG for a bit of investment money. They gave it to me. And we came up with the term segment of one marketing.
mm.
And I started really digging into that, working with clients on it, writing about it, speaking about it. And my whole career since then has been focused on the intersection of marketing and technology. Of course, when the internet happened in the 90s, I helped BCG start its e-commerce practice, and then I jumped to help start Digitas, which is now a pretty major international interactive agency. Then I jumped when we sold Digitas to Publicis. I jumped over to McKinsey and helped them start their digital marketing practice. And then eventually I became chief marketing officer at Aetna. And a lot of the time, it hasn't been just about working the mechanics of tools. It's about how do businesses change when they become more customer focused, more data driven, using digital tools, and now increasingly using AI. And that's what a lot of my advisory work is now, is helping companies sort through how not just to use AI as a tool here and there, but how to really change the way they operate.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've spoken to quite a few different experts in that space, from data with creates the infrastructure for generative AI to fully be utilized. And before we get into that, I'm curious to more about your experience again, um, pre-internet, going to internet, and then now with AI, right? I mean, you've seen these different types of cycles. Is there like a root philosophy? Because I would imagine like the technology advancements is like more of like a megaphone or amplification tool, right? Or also better visibility. But marketing to me, is there like a certain philosophy that you think of it as that you really need to understand from a very like basic perspective as a way to then leverage those tools?
Yeah, there's 2 things that I think we should keep in mind. First off, as data has gotten into marketing, marketing's always had a tension between trying to go for scale and economies of scale versus the granularity that information, that data, digital tools, and now AI enables you to happen. And the problem has always been that that granularity was just hard to manage. It just led to a lot of complexity, led to all kinds of specialization, sometimes manual tools. It was just cumbersome. So it's always been this tension about trying to go big and really move the needle versus using the data to do so more granularly. And so that's the tightrope
Mhm.
that marketers have walked, and trying to work through what are the best ways to set up your organization, your operation, and your tools. We can get into that in order to break that compromise between scale and granularity. The second thing, though, is also that marketing isn't just about driving acquisition. It really happens throughout a customer's journey. And increasingly now, digital capabilities, and certainly even more so now, AI, when digital first came, it was about using data to manage an individual's journey, not just when they found out about you, not just when they bought, but as a customer, as they're using your product, getting them to post more about your product, even managing them in terms of onboarding if you're a service-based or subscription company. So thinking about marketing as managing that whole journey and also needing to coordinate with the rest of the company in order to do that has been a challenge for a lot of marketers, but that has definitely been one of the things that digital can enable, and AI has put on steroids.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you touched upon a lot of responsibilities under that marketing umbrella. Um, I have a question around, number one, as from the consulting perspective, and then also advisory. Uh, Maybe, even within the experience that you had as CMO of Aetna, like how do you go in and assess a situation? Because I mean, you've worked with so many different companies. I'm sure later, very large companies and enterprise companies to maybe some younger companies as well. How do you assess kind of like where they are based on that scope of responsibilities that you suggested under that marketing umbrella? And then like, how do you start? Because I've found that a lot of times at the executive level, like where you when you're a chief anything, a lot of times it's managing personalities. And so I'm sure you've developed like a system over the years, but now it's like how do you get people to adopt the system? And it's like you have to figure out how you spin that narrative, how you tell that narrative to different individuals as you're working with them, whether they're within the same organization or different organizations. Seems to kind of like usually be the most critical part.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of people and culture issues. When you first walk in, though, it's hard to grasp that. You have to be a bit more objective. And so the things I tend to look for, and by the way, I've got a book coming out on personalization that's coming out in October, and we talk about this in the book, uh, is how is the company thinking about the customer? Are they managing the customer throughout a journey? Harkening back to something I said earlier, are they thinking about the customer throughout the journey? And is marketing set up to not just go after acquisition, although that's critical, but acquisition, cross-sell, retention, expansion, win back throughout all the cycle? So first off, is a company that has the opportunity and access to the customer thinking about that? And then secondly, are they using data and constantly testing and learning how to do it better? And through that testing and learning, they can generate more data that lets them manage customers better. But you have to be fast. You have to do things that are measurable. And those are two things right out of the gate that I look at as priorities. And if there's a third, the third is, and in the act of doing that, what's their sense of brand? So what's the way they're talking, the way they're interacting, the visual imagery, how they serve customers? Is there an ethos, a real ethos of the brand coming through that journey? So let's say three things. Those three things: the journey, the constant learning, the stitching through of a strong brand.
Yeah. We had spoken to somebody earlier this week that um helps kind of like companies bring back like innovation at the at the public level and they're public companies, and the idea of like going from disruptor to disruptee, and like how do they started off like for example like a Salesforce where they started off as the original disruptor, and then now they're worrying about being disrupted, right? And a lot of things that you're kind of talking about kind of allude to that a little bit, where um it's like bringing a lot of that original or the original, I guess, like culture that started these companies in the very beginning back to them. So I mean, I don't think it's probably not lost on them, but like how do you reintroduce that concept to them? Or in some cases maybe like they've changed like executives and they've outgrown the founder level, etc. And so like obviously they brought in more seasoned people, but how do you get them to start thinking in that more agile mentality?
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges that happens to companies as they get bigger is more and more specialization.
Yeah.
And I think especially in marketing, things have gotten way too specialized. Too many people focused way too narrowly. It also hurts their career tracks to be so narrow. And I think when you have people so finely specialized, they just execute, they're just doing stuff. And innovation takes cross-functional collaboration to come up with the ideas, figure out everything necessary to bring it to market, get it out, set it up to be tested. So it requires a collaborative cross-functional team. And I believe a lot in a concept called agile pods. Bezos has said this, two pizza teams. But you can do that in marketing also, and we have. When I was at Aetna, we had 5 of these going for different parts of our business that were pointed towards, for example, how do we build our position in the small business market? So really thinking through creatively with the cross-functional team there, how are we going to go after that? And so pointing people at goals that have to do with particular customer segments, learning about those segments, and then coming up with the ideas and do it. That's how you bring that spirit back. And you may need more than, several of those. But in a big company, when you get just very chopped up, you can't get there. So you've got to rethink your operations. And that's going to be especially true with AI, because AI is going to remove a lot of the need for hyper specialization, because it can get done a lot of the focused operational tasks that people had to be expert on. And now it frees up people to do more, and they're going to have to do more. So you want to build these cross-functional teams and let people have broader domain and work together. I think that's what I've seen in the companies I've worked with on how to unlock that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you can give us an example when you're saying like cross-functional teams. I mean, I think of, when we're working with startups, or when I work with startups and advise on them, like, I think you have to have product, marketing, sales, and customer success all talking to one another. And ideally that iterative feedback loop that comes from customer success is going back to product and marketing, and then they're able to change the narrative or iterate the narrative of how they're positioning themselves based on what the market is actually saying in real time. Obviously in a larger company, it's probably a lot more moving parts, or maybe it's not. Maybe you're trying to dumb it down into a little bit more simplicity like that. Can you give us an example, like you mentioned at Aetna, for example, that you have created these pods there, and bringing cross-functional teams? What were the functions that you were bringing together?
Yeah, sure. And it is like a startup in that you're trying to create that by pointing that pod at a customer group. So as a big company, you focus on a lot of different customers and a lot of different markets, but you got to get some people focused on a goal to improve performance with a customer set. So now answering your question in terms of the different skills, yes, it's what I mean, we didn't have customer success as such just because it's a different kind of business. But we had marketing strategy, analytics, absolute insights and analytics, absolutely critical, creative, operations, customer service, and product. We also had to bring in, because we were a healthcare company, compliance. That's pretty important along the way. So, it's about 6 to 7 people who are working together. And these folks had to learn how to use a variety of tools, and were just much more self-starters, able to take the initiative. They didn't need to get specialists to get things done. They just did it within their teams. And as long as we had compliance and legal reviewing it, all was cool.
Got it. Yeah, that's a great example. I mean, now that we can kind of touch upon this with like AI, right? You already kind of started to talk about it. That it's going to force marketers to do a lot more, or at least definitely be, I think, have a much like greater knowledge base around multiple disciplines versus being specialized. And I agree with that. I think like being hyper specialized ends up creating a lot of fat, and you're not being super efficient in terms of like how you are able to iterate on things. Um, with AI, we've talking to some specialists around that. A lot of companies, especially like the Fortune 100 type companies, seems like they're spending a lot right now on the data part, the data insights, right? Because that's really how you can leverage generative AI to the fullest degree. And I think speaking to some consultants that work with like an NVIDIA or OpenAI, like that's their vision. They want to see $1 billion company with like a handful of operators and be like completely vertically like AI integrated somehow, right? Um, Mike, I'm curious as to like when you're talking about data insights and the power of data in terms of shaping the marketing function. What are some of those insights that are critical, whether it's like a metrics KPI or um, any of those kinds of like, yeah, numbers that can help substantiate uh, that feedback loop to then making the
Well,
right.
yeah, and it's not just numbers, it's really trying to understand, coming back to what I talked about before, the customer journey. Let me give you a great example. So in one of our lines of business, people, well, in general, people don't understand their health insurance. They
Mhm.
don't. They don't understand how it operates, and they do things that end up costing them money. They get frustrated. They go to physicians who aren't in network, things like that, all kinds of things that cost them money, cost us money, lead to dissatisfaction. And so if you've got a creative, a pod who's focused on improving net promoter score, okay? Because net promoter score leads to retention, all a lot of good things. AI is not going to come up with the fact that people are calling in because they're not educated. We've got to figure out how to educate them. Let's try some interesting tools. So we found a tool called Sunday Sky that does personalized videos. And we offered every member a personalized video of their health insurance, what they bought, how it works, the economics, who in their family is covered, all of that. Calls to the call center go down by 20%,
Wow.
renewal rates go up, net promoter score goes up. You can't tell me AI is going to come up with that as a solution. They're not going to figure out how to innovate like that. Now, AI makes it easier to execute. It makes it easier to measure on the back end. Absolutely. And we're using an AI tool that does personalized video. But the insights to come up with that, to find the solutions and test, you got to have smart people doing that.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. We're definitely not there.
I don't think we ever will be there where that's totally automated. And do we
Yeah,
want to be? Um, I just think that kind of creativity will still require humans.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I mean, I think that, yeah, for sure. Even like as we get more mass adoption, I think with AI, we're also going to then have, it's like anything else. It becomes favorable until everybody's doing it, and then it becomes unfavorable, and then we go through those cycles of then trying to find the new thing to until when everybody's doing it, no longer creates more value, right? So then it discounts the value. Um, I would love to kind of talk about just, how the landscape you feel like has shifted with marketing and with the companies that you work with. And also, we didn't even touch upon this, but you're also a professor over at Harvard. And um, you know, what are you telling students or just like with the companies that you work with and advising on, what are the topics and the things that are top of mind right now thematically? Maybe, from the past year to this year, I just feel like there's been a lot of changes.
Yeah, I mean, there's many different angles to this, but one simple one, of course, everyone's talking about AI. And what I advise people is to think of AI at two levels. One level is the very tactical level, where you will have, think about a robot by your side who's going to get done all the not fun things that you don't want to do, that take up a lot of time, that are kind of mechanical, and that can free you up to be more creative and to simply do more. It should reduce the need for hyper specialization. It should make people be broader athletes. And so people should experiment. They should be trying different tools. They should be figuring out how to use them, understanding the risk, but doing that. But there's a higher level AI aspect too, which is changing the way you compete and thinking about it strategically. And this is where I've been in, because of segment one marketing, I've been focused on personalization for decades. And now I feel personalization is the key to unlock the growth potential of AI, not just everyone talks about efficiencies, automation. I'm talking about growth, and growth comes from rethinking, coming back to what I talked before, the customer journey, how you deliver value, how you're going to compete. So what is it that you're going to do differently, like Spotify enabling you to find new music every single day that is based on their understanding of the things that you've been doing on their platform. They are using information to change your experience and differentiate it. What's going to happen as Home Depot allows you to take a picture of your current bathroom, and in the act of doing so, it automatically takes the measurements. You upload a couple of pictures from Pinterest of styles that you like. You tell it your budget, and then you say, give me 5 different options for remodeling. I'll pick one and then coordinate actually getting it done. That's how it's going to be in terms of competition. And it's changing the value proposition. So marketers, CEOs, people leading strategy need to be thinking about what AI can do to change the way a brand competes at the same time that you're trying to do all the ground level tools. So that's what I stress. It's a little clearer more when I'm doing executive ed. Those are more senior students, and they get it, and they're seeing it. The MBA is still early. They're learning marketing, and that's a bit different. But it certainly is in the work that I'm doing with clients. It's why Mark Abraham, who's the head of the marketing practice at BCG, and I wrote the book on personalization. It's because we're losing sight of the strategic opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I can't agree more. I know at least from the go-to-market and sales communities, the two key words I keep on hearing is content and community as like becoming more important critical drivers for marketing and awareness. Like a lot of that, the outbound go-to-market that we saw with SaaS and the past 10 years just doesn't work anymore. And that harps on coming back to what you've probably already been always evangelizing, which is like that personalization aspect, and really focusing on the individual and the specific use case and speaking to them directly. um I would be curious, as like you've been doing this for a while, and you have pretty much achieved the highest accolade that a marketer could go out and do. What keeps you going? Because I feel like a lot of this is, you have to be personally invested, right? Like you have to be personally curious. You want to know, you want to keep on top of things. What's keeping you going to like learn? Like you don't need to know about AI, right? I mean, like really, at the end of
But
the
I
day,
do. I
I,
do. I want to.
yeah.
I
So here's
want to
just like what.
learn, Chris.
Yeah, so where does that come from, I guess, is like my question. Because I think that's that is obviously what separates, I think, executives and leaders is like a natural born curiosity. But where do you think that comes from, and what are you excited about, as you kind of learn more about this?
Yeah, I've always been about learning more, exploring, expanding the way I think about things. And then as I learn, trying to come up with other angles for
Mhm.
explaining something that people aren't seeing. And, if you're in consulting and you do thought leadership, you got to do that. You've got to come up with other angles, and they better be pragmatic. They can't just be, oh, crazy new frameworks. You got to be practical. And so this combination for me of learning about new things, seeing an angle, and then working with clients to make it happen. And I enjoy working with people. I'm a social person. I just love the interactions. In teaching, got 90 students in a classroom. They can't get more interactive than that, because especially the case method at Harvard, where it's back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So I like the energy of that. And especially now with AI, I've got relationships with a couple of VC firms, so I'm learning about AI at the ground level, while then working with larger companies on what it takes to actually make it happen. So I enjoy that. I get passionate about things. I'm very passionate about music. I play tenor saxophone, and
All that.
I'm a music fanatic. I tear apart music. I listen to. I really try to understand the angles and what people were thinking of and how they thought of the chord changes. So there are parallels there, and it just keeps me going.
Yeah. I mean, this is maybe a little bit more personal, but talking about your love for music and then that natural curiosity to kind of like break things apart. For me, that's like films. Like I love to like look at films
Mhm.
and like tear it apart, like why a director is choosing certain things or why a writer, but because everything's intentional, right? Because
Right,
you
that's
have to
right.
create it, right? So I wonder like with that parallel obviously exists in you. When did that love for music come? Like was that first
Oh,
before
that
the
was first. I was a
that was
kid.
first. Okay.
I was a kid. I was just, as a kid, constantly listening to music, played clarinet in fourth grade, that eventually switched to saxophone. No, that started first, certainly before I started thinking about marketing.
Yeah,
Let
yeah,
me
yeah.
tell you that. No, marketing happened when I was in business school. I had great professor my first year in business school. I wasn't quite sure exactly where I wanted to focus. And I said, wow, marketing is about growth. It's about people and psychology. It's
Yeah.
left brain and right brain. It's both the creative and the math. I said, music has that too. That's the kind of thing that turns me on. So marketing seems to have a lot of both. It's
Yeah.
also very team oriented, goal oriented. And so it just appealed to me a lot.
Yeah. This is good. This is I was trying to lead up to this question, which is what kind of traits do you think make a great marketer, right? I think obviously some things can be taught, but then there's also things I think again when you're going to the executive level, and in any role, there has to be a certain there's some like innate traits that some people can learn. I think, if they are really eh, really ambitious or like really conscientious around it. But the other part of it, I think, is like just inherent, and that's the curiosity part, the humility part, um, the people aspect, the curiosity about psychology, how people digest information. So, is there anything that you would say that stands out to you? Like, obviously, you teach students. Like, I mean, there's probably a wide array of students. I don't imagine that they're all going to necessarily end up in the world of marketing, but like, are there ones that stand out to you that have common traits that end up you're like, oh, they pick this up faster than others?
Yeah, I think it really is this notion of combining left brain and right brain.
Mm.
So it's because marketing requires emotion. And this is, again, one of the challenges with AI is you can't strip the emotion out of it. You've got to think about how to connect, like music connects. I mean, you got to
Uh,
think emotionally, what are going to be the chords that are going to resonate to someone, the builds, the crescendos, all of that, the harmonies. And so you've got to think about that, but you need the math, you need the
yeah,
analytics, and even more so in today's world. But it's always got to have both. And you've got to understand, what do people really want to accomplish that you're selling to them is going to enable them to do? And how can you not only give them something to do it, but make them feel great about it when you do? And so you've got to be thinking in that way. But there's also one other thing you didn't mention, which I do want to put on the table. Great marketers bring oxygen into the room.
mm,
They inspire people by
mm,
their knowledge and by what is possible. They shouldn't blow smoke, and they can't do a lot of crazy hand waving stuff, but they got to bring real oxygen into the room and get people excited by what's possible, and then be pragmatic about what it's going to take to test it, what value it could create. They have to understand the business. They have to be plugged in. They can't just be idea people, but
mm.
they have to bring energy.
Yeah, it's a perfect intersection, I think, of like that creative and you're like you're talking about the right brain part of like the data and the analytics part of it, which you're merging these two things, which is one storytelling, and then do you have the correct data to ensure that's the right
Mhm,
story, and are you scaling the
mhm,
story effectively? Um,
mhm.
yeah, it's funny. There's so many. When I worked in entertainment for a while, doing that for like 7 years in previous career, and that's kind of my takeaway of like how I ended up in growth marketing is like that intersection of those two worlds. Because
Yeah.
I really studied finance, right? So it's like did modeling and spreadsheets, and that's kind of seems like the natural organic uh, world that I'm in now. So awesome. Um, on that note, any other like just one last question here, but like any other key takeaways of where you think, I know we talked about AI and and how that can impact marketers, going forward. But like just in the next year, in let's say 2025, that's coming up already. So right around the corner. Um, is there any kind of like trends that you think, like, do you think AI is going to catch up to a place where like marketing teams in 2025 will be cut by 50%? Uh, do you see that yet happening, or do you like,
No.
okay.
No, I don't. Um, I see them scaling to handle more. I
Mm,
think there may be different mixes of people. I think if you're just in a purely operational execution role, yes, you should be nervous. But hopefully companies are arming people, teaching them, and those who can extend their capabilities. There's still a lot of shortages of labor around. There's still a lot that's going to be needed to compete. And I do think it's a question of scalability. And marketers have always been asked to do more without their budgets going up. And here's the opportunity to make that happen.
so,
It'd be able to have a lot more throughput.
yeah,
So I don't see those kind of cuts, unless of course a company is struggling financially. Marketing is often a place they start cutting, so that does happen. Uh, but I don't think it's inherent to AI.
yeah,
I think there's too much opportunity. Also, it depends a lot on how you define marketing. If marketing is just about getting ads out the door, yeah. But if marketing is really about helping to understand the customer and then manage them throughout the whole journey to bring value and build brand equity, there's a lot to get done there.
yeah.
I mean, I've got B2B clients who are investing more in marketing because they see marketing as the way to scale when they can't just keep adding salespeople.
Mm,
And they want more marketing heft in there. And the tools are enabling marketing to do more, but their expectations are going up. So I think there'll be a lot of remixing along the way as well.
absolutely. On that note, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Sure.
Very sensitive to our time, so thank you. It was a lot of great nuggets in there. So yeah, absolutely pleasure.
My pleasure too, Chris. Have a great weekend.
Same to you.